1994, man.
Big year.
Running through our years, kind of jumping around again, like we said before. So what we do, 99, 95, 93, now it's 94. Next we're going to do 1927.
I thought we had 1837
Yeah.
for the year of the Whigs.
And you got sleeves.
Yeah, and a Godflesh shirt that I waited months for.
Where'd you get that from?
From their Bandcamp, and it's cracked too. Of course, the second I wash it, it gets cracked. Yeah.
It was like the thick print.
Right. It was only $15 though, so I'm kind of.
That's it. 15?
Yeah. It was marked down. Now I know why, because it's cracked. And it was made by
Justin Broderick made it in his garage.
Yeah, it was made with crayon.
Yeah, melted crayon. He just.
Yeah, big year. Godflesh will be mentioned. We have a lot of stuff. A lot of big metal, rock, grind.
Yeah, this is. I mean,
black metal. It's everything.
It's crazy when you don't think about. I think I said this before. Every year is probably going to be like this because I always know that albums were released at a certain time, but when you start looking at the years, you're just like, holy crap, man.
It's another one of those transitional years too. And I think with death metal especially, the death metal records I mentioned, some of them I really love a lot. Mm-hmm. Some of them are decent, but I think the black metal was a lot stronger, and I think some other genres stand out more. Some are kind of waning a little bit. Mm-hmm. Big year for rock. I guess this is one of the biggest years for the music industry too in the 90s.
Yeah,
a huge peak. So we have off the bat. I know we're Far Beyond Driven fans. Pantera, #1 on the Billboard charts in '94. I don't think that's happened.
Dude, think about that.
Since for a metal band, I can't think of something that's.
I don't know. I don't know. I don't think. I could be wrong. I don't think any new metal band hit #1.
Not #1. I don't think Korn maybe had. I think maybe Limp Bizkit or Korn probably had a #1 record at some point. I don't know if it debuted at #1 though. I think.
But that's to me that is nothing.
Yeah.
Compared to Far Beyond Driven being. I remember back in the day when it did hit #1, I was like, it was something that. I don't know. I know for a lot of people probably thought, oh, this lends some validity to heavy metal, but I was just kind of like.
I think it's
crazy.
I think it makes sense when I was looking back at the year because Euthanasia comes out, and that's still a pretty big Megadeth record. It's one of the last ones I really, really, really loved by them.
I agree.
And I think Soundgarden, Alice in Chains, with Super Unknown and Jar of Flies, heavier music was kind of popular, so it kind of makes sense that Pantera would debut. Now I think it'd be unfathomable.
What do you think of? Because I know eventually we're going to do a Pantera kind of retrospective, but it's weird, as soon as you said 94, I went back, I listened to Far Beyond Driven. It's probably the first record I listened to from 94.
Yeah, I think I did the same.
To kind of go back and just start to look at all this stuff, and I can tell you right now, I love the songs on it that I love, I absolutely love.
Yeah.
What's the one song? Good Friends and a Bottle of Pill.
Yeah.
It's horrible.
Yeah, it's completely goofy. Yeah, it's kind of a goofy song.
But love their cover of Planet Caravan. Mm-hmm. It was just such a cool. The videos for
I'm
Broken, 5 Minutes Alone, which is the one that he had the long sleeve. I Hate God.
The crowbar.
That's dude. I was like, somebody just posted the other day. I think it was one of those videos. They were like, awesome video, but what is Dime doing? Go back and look at the video. He's hopping around like.
It is kind of weird. Yeah, it's definitely looking back, it's groovy. It has a lot of heaviness to it. I think Great Southern Trendkill is probably their most aggressive record.
Oh, for sure.
I think Far Beyond Driven might be my favorite Pantera record. I think it's a perfect representation of what they were doing with aside from the glam years.
Yeah,
I think they really captured what they were doing. It's probably their finest moment.
And I think a lot of, I think that I would say more Vulgar influenced a lot of other bands, because there's another album that came out this year, debut album by Machine Head.
Absolutely.
Which is to me, has always been heavily influenced by Vulgar.
Mm-hmm.
And they come out with Burn My Eyes. Now,
I think Testament and Machine Head, both California bands, had great records that year.
That's my favorite
Transitional
record.
I love Low is probably my favorite Testament record also.
Yeah.
That's my favorite. I think that it's I love New Order. I love Practice What You Preach. I love Legacy, the thrash stuff. But I think that during this time you had bands that were. I think the thrash thing was definitely by this time kind of maybe waning a little bit.
Well, with '93, we talked about Sound of White Noise, Chaos AD. There, a lot of these thrash bands were kind of moving into like a more aggressive direction, maybe less thrashy,
Mm-hmm.
but I love those
You can't
albums
out
are
extreme the
incredible.
death metal bands at this time. I mean, what are you going to do? That's thrash isn't really extreme
But
at this point.
think about that. Like Testament is on Atlantic Records. They release Low in '94, and you got James Murphy on guitar.
Yeah.
Who's like death metal hero.
Right.
And I think this is the last album before it was the last album with Greg Christian, I think, before he came back later.
Yeah.
And it was also I think he left a couple years after that. And then
I think
Louis
like before
Clemente
Demonic came out.
Yeah, and then Louis Clemente's not on it, Alex Skolnick's not on it, so John Tempesta
Yeah.
is on it.
Bit of a lineup change, but it still has that Testament sound. I
It
think
does.
Demonic.
It's the
deviated
first
from
Testament I bought.
Yeah, it's probably one of the earliest ones I heard. Also.
And it to this day, it's got a perfect mix of everything, from All I Could Bleed, which is probably like my favorite track, but then Dogface Gods, which,
Yeah.
think about that on
Larry.
a major label,
Oh yeah.
Dogface Gods.
PC is one of my favorite Testament songs
Dude,
of all time. Love it. COC too. I mean, Deliverance, breaking away from the hardcore punk thrashy kind of thing. A lot of people, I think were upset when they heard Deliverance. I love Deliverance. I've always thought it was one of my favorite
Yeah.
records. But I like the stonery kind of stuff.
Well, like with Blind, that was like such a shock because it doesn't sound like Technocracy
No,
or Animosity
really
or
doesn't.
and I love Blind. I mean, I worship that album, but when Deliverance came out, and I still have the big poster flat.
Yeah.
That I got from from Quonset Hut down in Canton. I remember I went in there and I bought it, and there was a guy that worked there. He was an older dude. He was always really nice, and I bought that, and he was like, "You like this band?" I was like, I already had Blind at that point, and I was like, "Yeah, I love this band." And he kind of took it off the wall.
Yeah.
I have it around here somewhere, but I should get it framed. But it's like a perfect square. It's just like a giant.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
But that album, when I saw the video for Albatross,
Oh yeah.
Clean
Catchy.
My Wounds, Broken Man. I mean, dude, that album is
Groovy. I think that again, like I think the groove. A lot of bands moving away. I think groove is a really big common theme here. We'll get into it when we get into death metal, but also like bands like Biohazard, State of the World Address, Madball Set It Off. I think that played an influential role on heavy music too, where it's like those are really that New York style, bringing more of the groove to it. Definitely influenced a lot of like thrashier bands and heavier. I think even a lot of more extreme bands, like Machine Head especially.
Well, what do you think? Do you like State or do you like Urban Discipline?
State of the World Address is my favorite.
That's
Biohazard.
yeah.
I think it's catchier. I think it's.
Dude, it's hard. It's like it's a toss up for me because Urban is when I got on board with them, and I like Modeleo after.
Yeah, it's cool.
But
I don't
it's
listen to
not.
it often. Yeah.
It doesn't have the feel of Urban or State.
It doesn't have the standout tracks that those other ones have.
Dude, I love I loved it. It just thinking about it now, it takes me back to North Canton. Being in high school at that point, and I mean that whole year. I mean, it was, that Biohazard album and In Testament and COC and
Scratch the Surface by Sick of It All. Too.
Dude, was that '94?
94, huge. No, speaking of New York bands, another huge
That's
bands that would tour with metal bands and play a big, influence.
that's my first. That's my first Sick of It All, and I was just talking to our friend Arnie. About that, and he was like, "Yeah, man, he totally agreed. That album is so good." And Luke Haller is his vocals.
Oh, great.
I've never seen them. Have you ever seen them live?
Oh, bunch of time. They're great live.
Really?
They're all amazing live. One of the first hardcore shows I ever went to. Did you like Rollins' band? Wait came out in '94 too.
Yes.
Speaking of the.
So that's again. There's a year of firsts because that was
Yeah.
my first Rollins band. I actually think the End of Silence is. I like it a little more.
I like it more too.
But Wait.
I think it's more. I think End of Silence is a little bit more a refined sound.
Yeah, wait. I mean, obviously, Liar being the main track off of that, but that's why I bought it, and it was so cool. Like to go, I know when my kids always ask about how music was back in the day. I, I can't express to them how different it was. If you listen to the radio or if you watched MTV.
Yeah.
Because
a lot of this stuff was on the radio. Alice in Chains and Soundgarden were massive.
Dude,
bands.
yeah, I mean, Super Unknown is a lot of people's favorite Soundgarden album, which I think is a phenomenal album. My favorite was Bad Motorfinger, but and this is everything that came out that year to me was so strong. Even Alice Cooper, The Last Temptation.
Yeah, it's true. And a lot of people forget, man. I know it's a bit of a jump here, but it's like a lot of really massively successful records, like Dookie by Green Day.
You're gonna get dragged over.
Oh, well, it's great. I love Dookie. It's great. For a lot of kids, that was the first record we ever bought. Yeah. And Offspring Smash, still to this day, the #1 selling independent record of all time. That's a massive.
I don't care what people say about that album. I love it. I think it's fun. I was in high school at the time. I had that album back then. I did have Dookie. Billy Joe, his vocals always annoyed me. Yeah. It's like, why does he sound like he's British?
I thought I was I was going through the just to get over it really quickly, but I mean, like you had Green Day, Offspring, Jawbreaker puts out 24-Hour Revenge Therapy right after the Nirvana tour. Mm-hmm. Then you also have like Tragedy by Disclose comes out in '94, Driller Killer. The guys from Meebix have Zygote. Wind of Knives comes out in '94. Dystopia, Human Equals Garbage, where they actually thank Kurt Cobain for killing himself in the liner notes. So there's a real, as punk is coming up, as being massive in this year and millions of records sold, you really have early. I mean, I've said this before in a couple of episodes. Disrupt, Unrust. For a lot of people, that's a favorite.
Bad Religion, Stranger Than Fiction. That I know you're not a big Bad Religion fan, right?
No. Turbo Negro, comes out their debut record.
It's amazing. What was that?
Never Is Forever.
Okay. It's funny because I was actually on a big Turbo Negro kick the other day, just jamming stuff.
Nail Bomb, I would consider kind of a Point Blank being '94. That's kind of more punk take on.
Oh, dude, 100%. Somebody commented in the group. I can't remember who it was. They said that they thought that if it would just end up sounding like a Sepultura album if it weren't for Alex Newport.
I think so too.
And I agreed with that because I was like, I never really thought about it, but it would just sound like an industrial Sepultura album.
Yeah.
But that album is so good.
I love. As we were going back and listening to records, I listened to that record probably 8 times in a row one day.
Didn't he tour with that?
They did
recently.
I think he may have. They did.
There's no Alex Newport, so
right. There's no point. I know when they were active, they just did like the Dynamo set. I think that was their only show they ever did, and then they did the live thing for it.
Proud to Commit.
Yeah, Proud to Commit commercial suicide. It's a cool record. I mean, Totalitar comes out with their one of their debut record too. Their first only '90s record, not debut, but it's you had Avail come out with Dixie. I mean, there's really a lot of good punk this year, but it's a really massive year. And I know a lot of people don't like the Green Day thing, but it's like that's a massive record, that '90s.
The thing is, I listen to it now, and I just don't like it. I listened to Smash, Offspring, recently, and I still think it's a fun album, But when I listen to Dookie, it gets on my nerves. But I will admit that if it weren't for that out, they brought punk.
Oh yeah, the Malls.
Exactly. So whether that. It is what it is. So whether you think it's positive or negative, I could probably ask a lot of punks, and they would say that it's negative because punk always has this like very independent underground like aesthetic to it.
You don't start getting into punk and listen to Driller Killer the first. I mean, you got to start somewhere. And for a lot of kids,
that's the thing. And maybe a lot of people did. Maybe they only listened to Offspring and Green Day, and then shopped at Walden Books and got
their neighbors in Neurosis put out Enemy of the Sun this year too. So talk about departures, bands that used to play shows together at Gilman. You have Green Day, and then you have Neurosis, do very different paths. Enemy of the Sun to me kind of starts what Neurosis would become. Silver. It's like I think Neurosis on Enemy of the Sun gets away from like the kind of the crust punk thing, and they start to really have that Neurosis sound. That's one of my, aside from Through Silver, that's my favorite Neurosis record.
I'm gonna bring up. You remember? I always bring up when you bring up Neurosis. I saw them on Through Silver and Blood.
Incredible.
Right in Akron at the Jar Arena, and I had to ask because I couldn't remember
what was that crowd.
Year
they probably
it
had
was.
to hate them.
Dude, it was weird seeing them because I heard of them just at the time through like metal mags and stuff.
Yeah.
But I didn't know what they sounded like. Clutch was the second band that went on, and I don't get me started on that
Forget that
piece
Clutch
of
has
shit.
been around
Man.
that long.
Yeah, don't even get that. That is shittiest generic.
Yeah, they're
can't stand that band. Even then, I thought
they're sucking
crap.
the right. They're sucking the right orifices to get on these tours. Still to this day, they're still somebody's buying it.
Dude, I always say Clutch to me is like if somebody's like, yeah, I listen to metal. It's like, oh, you do? What do you like? Oh, I like the Black Album.
Yeah, I love ice cream. What's your favorite flavor? Vanilla.
Vanilla. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's like when people say, oh yeah, I'm into stoner. Yeah, my favorite band's Clutch. All right. I'm like, there's like better shit out there.
Right. That's kind of.
But yeah, I remember when Neurosis went on, the best way I described it, even back then to my friends, because they were like, what did you think of that? And I'm like, honestly, you got seasick listening to it.
Yeah.
Because like the music was like.
Yeah. Waves of a sound. Yeah.
And
they were very oppressively heavy.
Dude, and they were walking around after, like when we left. Actually, it was before Pantera went on. You could see them walking through the crowd. They looked like the grimiest pieces of shit, and it was like, but they were great. And I have to think it's probably because of Phil that they were on that tour. Like
100%. Yeah.
Yeah.
And they later on with see what you want about Phil, but I mean like a very big supporter of the underground. We'll get into Dark Throne later when we get into black metal, but he used to definitely rock, their shirts and was always really supportive of a lot of the underground music. And, for a band of their caliber, like it was cool of him to do that. And I mean, like there was, for a lot of these, at this time especially, like, for a band like that's that level of success, I think it was cool that they shined a spotlight on some of the other bands that wouldn't have had
the
that.
video with it. I Hate God. And that band goes to number one, Pantera. That is, it's kind of crazy to think about now, but
a lot of like I noticed too by this time it's a good transition for the death metal stuff because as that first wave of death metal is kind of ending by '94, and you can kind of tell. I mean, a lot of people say maybe their band's trying to go more commercial, but bands are definitely trying to. It's definitely transitioning. You have like the Bleeding by Cannibal Corpse, which I love. It's definitely a little bit more cleaned up. It's a little bit more, the vocals a little more audible. Songwriting's a little bit more polished. Bob Rousse's gone by this point. The songs are a little tightened up. You have Hypocrisy, Fourth Dimension is a bit bigger of a sound.
It is. It's a departure, I think, from
First Peter,
Penetralia and Osculum. It to me, the Fourth Dimension was like the first album that kind of started. I'm like, Fourth Dimension, Final Chapter, Abducted, like
it's a different era at that point.
That starts like what I came to know as Hypocrisy.
Yeah, me too. I love some of my favorite songs on Fourth Dimension. I first got into them from just the Vakken live album. Anthony and I first had
Destroys Vakken live.
And my favorite songs were Apocalypse and Fourth Dimension, and that's why I picked up the record. Now they do sound different on record, and it's a bit too polished maybe. World Demise comes out in '94. A lot of people don't like it. Let's just get out of the way right now. It's the second best obituary, in my opinion, after The Incomplete. Hate me if you want, but
Well, I thought you were going to say Cause of Death was the first.
Third favorite for me. I love World Demise. I've always loved the tone. I love the groove.
Well, I mean, it was great having you on here, but
but I noticed that too. I love groove though. My favorite Flesh Crawl is Impurity.
No, I don't mind the World Demise as your second favorite. It's the Incomplete because the Incomplete to me is probably it just had weird production. It didn't have the feel.
I love the flat, dead kind of sound, the Celtic Frost. I love Alan West too. I love his riffs. So I love James Murphy's great.
Do you like his meth?
Yes, I love those methed out Celtic Frost riffs. Amazing that a guy was hopped up on speed could write riffs like that. But I think it's it's all your starting point. I always loved World Demise. The tone of the guitar is awesome. It's heavy. A lot of my hardcore friends actually love World Demise. A lot of death metal fans, purist death metal people hate it, but a lot of hardcore kids that don't really care about death metal love that record. And I can see why. There's a lot of groove. There's a lot of just different kind of heaviness. Not as much thrash in there.
Mm-hmm.
And I noticed that with a lot of these kind of bands at this time. Like you have Brutality. I think really is more orthodox for this year. When the Sky Turns Black. Moral Throne of Nazarene, my favorite incantation too, 94.
I'm gonna I think I admit that I'm not the biggest incantation fan. I totally appreciate them. I appreciate their longevity. John McEntee is like a death metal legend. Okay, I get that. I've never been. To me, it's always a hard listen because I can never pick out like actual songs. Now, Brutality.
Yeah. Incan's more of a vibe.
So when you're listening to Incantation, it's like...
That's why the bands who rip them off are terrible, in my opinion.
Yes. Because I don't mind when Incantation does it because it's Incantation. When the other bands do it, it's like you're stealing their vibe, and then that's what your whole album is. With Incantation, it was like that's who they were.
Yeah.
And I do think the newer stuff is a little more polished, but yeah, I mean that Brutality album to me is.
You also have like some really heavy like death metal stuff that really like Infester, to the Depths of Degradation comes out in '94. You have Oppressor, Solstice of Oppression. Those are really kind of little bit more extreme death metal records. Gutted here from Ohio, Bleed for Us to Live. Love that,
dude.
So catchy. So listening back to that now, it's amazing, dude. It's
like,
so underrated. If that came out now, they'd be the biggest band going right now.
Dude, it's like, I can't even, I don't know. Great guitar solos. The riffs are there. It's just a fun album. It's like an awesome, killer death metal album. And
I think that, bands like Gutted were doing something a little bit, it sounds fresh. Because, you have Grave doing Soulless at this time. You have, band Amorphous doing Tales from a Thousand Lakes. These bands are definitely moving away from their super death metal roots.
Well, I think that they took that brutal death metal, but they made it so that it wasn't so brutal you couldn't enjoy it.
Still catchy.
It's catchy.
But it wasn't a departure like Amorphous doing Tales.
And the production, dude, is so perfect. Like, everything about that album is great. Like, and I know they recently, maybe it's on Repulsive Echo or somebody redid it recently, but if you can find it, absolutely check it out. Like, grab the album. It's classic.
As far as Swedish, too, I think the best Swedish death metal record for 94 has to be Gorment, Ending Quest. I think it's amazing. Still one of my favorite Swedish death metal records of all time. It's also not a departure at all. Other bands are kind of incorporating a little bit more. I think Gorment, Uncanny, too.
It's
a great record from '94. I think those bands are still kind of doing it. I would say Flesh Crawl Impurity is actually my top for '94. Then tied with Gorment for '94. And I even throw that Gutted maybe at 3. I love that record. I listen to it a lot. Shub Nigger Off, Evilness and Darkness too. Great album. Sadistic Intent, Resurrection. Just kind of going through Purgatory Afterglow.
I was say you gotta mention Edge of Sanity.
You're a big fan. I know Anthony. A lot of people were talking to me about. A lot of people messaging me, and Bolt Thrower got a lot of love too
Well, if you didn't mention Edge of Sanity, Laterno would come to your house and slit your throat.
For Victory is my favorite Bolt Thrower, by the way.
For Victory.
For Victory is '94. Fourth Crusade. What do you go with?
Yeah, Fourth.
I mean, it's they don't have a bad record.
No, that's the one thing they don't. I mean, they're like the AC/DC of death metal.
Yeah, they just constantly make just
good record after good record.
I love Altar, Youth Against Christ, but I really love Autumn Years by Furball. I love that record. I love Reflections by Convulse. A lot of people hate that. I think it's... I don't mind when these bands do these a little bit more musical...
That's what I don't mind it either.
It's not World Without God, but I mean, it's different. It's nothing like that, but it's...
If it's different, as long as it's good...
Yeah.
As long as it doesn't as long as it's not so different that it's just like buffoonery, then I'm totally fine with that.
Club Mondo Bazaar by Pungent Stench is another one. That was the first... One of the reasons I think I love the Death and Roll stuff so much is I remember getting Club Mondo on tape at Ultrasound for $3. And I remember picking up thinking, this is a weird, cover. This guy's in like bondage gear. Because I had like the Nuclear Blast. They have multiple versions
Then
of
you
that.
open it up and you're just like...
Which I noticed about Pungent Sense, they used to do tons of different versions of artwork to make it seem like it was like special,
Yeah.
Good marketing tactic. And I remember putting on and like it was so groovy. It sounded like Soundgarden, but death metal. And I was like, this is awesome.
Yeah, different than like Bangkok Buttering.
And then I heard Wolverine Blues after that, and I was like, this is just like this. So when people wonder why I like this kind of stuff, like, dude, I remember it was Club Mondo, I think, really opened my mind to like that death and roll kind of sound, all the groove and all the...
Always liked it. I always, those Pungent Stench albums, Club Mondo, and then the EP, the Dirty Rhyme Psychotronic Beats.
Awesome.
I love both of those albums. And I think, I can't remember what the video was for the one track, but they were playing like pink guitars and they're like, and it's like, if it was any other band, like death metal, but there's something about Pungent Stench that was like so perverted and just sick.
Yeah, it was definitely 100%.
But still at the same time, which that band kind of delved into nothing but stupidity, because I know like Martin Schrank and like the other guys are
definitely weird guys.
Now it's like what Schrank plays
Pungent Stench.
Pungent Stench, and it's like
whatever. I mean, I think like I think Sleepers too. The Asphyx self-titled, I think is great too.
Which one?
The self-titled Asphyx from '94.
Okay, that
I think it's awesome.
It's under the radar.
Totally.
And that is, and I'm gonna say it, it's one of the best doom death albums.
Awesome.
It's so good, dude. It's like I love the early stuff. The self-titled is my favorite Asphyx
really?
album.
My favorite is besides Last One on Earth, which is my favorite. My second favorite, God Cries.
Dude,
we'll get into in '96. I love that album. The song Frozen Soul, probably one of my favorite Asphyx songs on God Cries. I love that. And As Humanity Fades, Mortal Skull, I love that record too. Mm-hmm. It's good. I think those bands are just classic. I mean, they're kind of keeping it going. Keeping that style kind of more alive. What do you think of Terminal Spirit Disease? I listened to it a lot gearing up for this, and I like it a lot more than I remember.
Here's the thing. I always used to I always listen to only Slaughter of the Soul and ignore all the others, much to my detriment, because I love all of those now. I don't like them as much as Slaughter is one of those albums that I can listen to over and over again. It's so groundbreaking, but
it doesn't sound anything like the rest of their stuff, though.
No. And
it's almost like a different band.
Yeah. And that's the thing. It's like, so if I listen to Slaughter, it's like I'm listening to Slaughter of the Soul. But if you go with the other ones, it's complete. I mean, my God. But I dig it. I don't think it's not my favorite by them.
I ended up listening to it a few times for this. And I remember I had it when I was younger, and I remember like what Anthony and I used to do is like if one of us had a record from a band, we would kind of burn it from the other guy, and we would kind of like share a collection in a weird way because we shared clothes and everything else. We were and
you shared
bodily fluids, but it's like I'm kidding.
That's for another episode.
We used to like I had that one for a while. I remember listening to it a lot when I was younger and just kind of thinking like, it's okay. But once you hear Slaughter, you're kind of just like, I don't need anything else by this. You just don't care about the rest of their discography.
Yeah, and it kind of sucks because I think maybe if they continued to put out albums after Slaughter of the Soul, maybe it would be a little different.
Which is hard. It's hard to,
and that's it.
You're raising the bar kind of high.
And then it was like, okay.
Yeah, it kind of blew your wad.
Yeah, for sure. And I think for, my thing that I focused a lot on was going back to hard rock in that era, because I was still listening to a lot of hard, and I think that there's
I was waiting for
a lot of phenomenal albums that came out.
There definitely are.
At that time. Probably, I know I take a lot of shit for it, but it's my favorite Crew album, and that's the self-titled with Harabi.
Love it.
Vince is gone. He does Exposed, which is we touched upon on the '93, which is my favorite Vince Neil album.
Do you like Exposed more than self-titled Crew, or do you like?
No, the self-titled crew to me is.
I go Exposed before myself.
I mean, Exposed has Steve Stevens, so it's like you can't go wrong with the guitar playing. It's over the top. It's just like unbelievable. But
him and Krabi both sound great on those respective records, though. Krabi sounds awesome on the Motley Crue record.
Bob Rock is a great hard rock producer.
I mean, the proof's in the pudding.
And Tommy Lee never sounded better. Nikki Sixx never sounded better. Mick Mars has come out and said
there's
we never played better.
There is a little. I wish there was a little bit more lead guitar.
It was like
It was a little stripped down on the guitar for me. That was time too, I think.
Go back and listen to it, man. I think some of the guitar solos, it was less flashy.
Yeah,
and it was just Karabi just brought something to that band. That was when I saw Hooligan's Holiday. It was like the lead-off single. First of all, his vocals are absolutely phenomenal.
Yeah,
he's going to be here in Akron in July with Winger and Tom Kiefer. But
I wish it wasn't a Motley Crue record because I wish they would have done a different band and called it something else.
That's kind of the thing, because obviously the tour was a bust.
Which I mean, you're kind of
it sucks because if the album
yeah.
sucked, it would make sense that they would want to move on and go back with Vince. But it's like the album to me is the best thing they ever wrote, because
we wouldn't have Generation Swine.
You had somebody in the band like Karabi who could sing, who could play guitar, who could write killer tunes. He came from the Scream. That album, Let It Scream, is absolutely awesome. It's almost like Racer X mixed with, this hard rock. But yeah, and then Crue, they get rid of him. They get Vince back, and then put out arguably the biggest piece of shit.
That's one of the. We'll get into it when we get to '98. But that's probably one of the worst.
Crap, dude.
That's probably one of the worst comeback albums. With this, I mean,
the
that's
absolute
really bad
garbage.
There isn't one redeemable second of that record. It's really stupid. The artwork is stupid.
Mm-hmm.
The songs are just completely. It's almost like a Methods of Mayhem demo.
Well, I remember when they came back and they were on some award show. It was like, Crue's coming back, and they played "Shout at the Devil," but it was like modernized, and it was just.
Yeah.
I'm like, man, this isn't Crue. This sucks,
Yeah.
And there's you can find on YouTube actually the kind of the behind the scenes, the recording of the self-titled album.
Right.
And it's killer. It's like, even when I've read interviews over the years with Tommy, with Mick, even with Nikki, who's an absolute nuclear douchebag, as far as I'm concerned. But
everybody but Mick's really a nuclear douchebag.
Yeah, and they all talk about that process. That a lot of those songs, like as soon as Karabi walked in, the first meeting, they wrote some of those tunes, and it was like it just clicked, and they were like that. He brought something out because
he can play. He was more of a musician.
Vince Neil. I love Vince Neil, but he's horrible now.
I don't think he was ever really in that band in the first place because of his musical chops. I mean, I think it was more.
I mean, they literally said he got the chicks. That's why he's in the band.
If he was 225 pounds, he'd have never even been in that band.
Yeah,
he's not Pavarotti. I mean,
but I mean, we had Tesla with "Bust a Nut," which I still think is a great album.
Cinderella.
Still Climbing was their swan song.
It probably is the last great Cinderella record.
But I mean, there's no other Cinderella.
Yeah.
They were supposed to. I remember, dude. They were supposed to. They came back. I saw them.
I thought they did an album after that, though. That was
the what?
I thought they did an album after Still Climbing.
No, that was it. That was it.
Yeah, I guess.
So I saw them live in, it's got to be 97, 98. And I went with a couple friends. We went up to the Odeon. It was the original band, and it was one of the greatest shows I've ever seen. They put on a fucking perfect show. The house was packed. And then at the end of the show, my buddy at the time, who was like an absolute like straight-laced dude, like total turbo Christian, and he got like really mad. He like walked past, like, what's he doing? We get back in the car. We're like, dude, what? That show was killer. Like, what's the problem? He was like, The guy next to me asked me if he could give me a blowjob. And we were like, wait, what? But
I wonder how many people ask people if they have blowjobs at the Gourmet show. That's like.
But yeah, dude, you had you know, that Tesla album. The Cult came out with a self-titled '94. I think that album's garbage. But if you can find that album that comes with a live show, I think it's live at the Marquee. I could be wrong. That live gig, which my buddy Kevin Collins, because I remember him picking it up and saying, "Have you heard this?" I said, "Dude, that album's crap."
Yeah.
And he was like, no. You need to get it because of the live album. If you can find the version with the live album. I ended up finding it used years later, and he's absolutely right.
Danzig 4 was a good rock record.
That's, to me, the last.
A lot of people chimed in with me, and they're messaging me, a few people, and like, that's when I was posting it. I post a lot of the stuff I'm going to be talking about. A lot of people messaged me like, that's my favorite Danzig record. I was like,
yes.
Really? Because mine's always Lucifuge. It was always my favorite.
Mine's 3. I don't think you can go wrong with the first 4.
You can't. I'm surprised that people say 4 is their favorite. That's kind of...
It's...
Bit of a Nine Inch Nails influence. I mean, Downward Spiral, 94.
Yeah.
I know that's going to be a lot.
That's the last Danzig, because we want to talk about that, and then Black Acid Evil, Black Acid Devil.
Black Acid ain't getting played in my house. That's what it is. There really is.
Black Acid Trash.
After 4, I don't... Mike Hammer and I listen to a lot of Danzig, even a lot of the newer stuff too. I like Death Red Sabaoth. I can still get into, but 4 is the last one I really like consistently jam.
Look,
often.
Glenn is never going to see this. It's never going to happen. But I would love to tell that dude. I hate to break it to you, but John Christ, Eerie Von, and Chuck Biscuits,
right?
Unfortunately for you, made you what you are.
Yeah.
Now, you were big with the Misfits. Like, everybody knows you from the Misfits, from Sam Hain.
Sure.
But give me a break. Those first 4 Danzig albums.
I think John Christ is Danzig. I think after 4,
it's that playing, dude.
Yeah.
And
there's 4, he's kind of it's not really. He doesn't shine a lot on there, and I think that's why it suffers.
It's the thing is, I just read a recent interview with him where he's talking about that album. He's talking about, I guess Danzig was supposed to be kind of Danzig with like a revolving door of musicians, but the first that group worked out so well. I mean, my God, Chuck Biscuits on drums, who's
Lucifuge is some of the best blues metal you'll ever hear.
You can't beat it, dude. And a lot of that stuff, yes, it is Glenn that wrote.
Sure.
Pretty much. I mean, the dude was talented back then, and I think that listening to Death Red Sabaoth, however the fuck you say it, but listening to that, which I think is a great comeback album, but I always, every time I'm listening to it, I'm thinking,
I could just listen to
dude, what if you had John Christ on guitar here? It would just catapult that album.
Where's the Dirty Black Summer? Where's the Snakes of Christ? Where's the track like that that's powerful on that album that's not there because the songwriting really isn't there? And I think that I mentioned Nine Inch Nails briefly, but I think that Downward Spiral, I think Nine Inch Nails in general had a massive influence on a lot of bands, and I think they were so huge. And I recently in the last few years got into Nine Inch Nails, and my friend Novak is like obsessed with them, and it took me years, but I finally came around, and it's like Godflesh, I always came up with, and Selfless, by the way, this year. Probably one of my favorite albums of '94 is Godflesh, Selfless. That was I got into Godflesh a lot, and people were always like, "You should check out Nine Inch Nails." I was always telling Nine Inch Nails fans like, "You should listen to Godflesh," and it was always like, but I think Nine Inch Nails played a big role in Danzig and a lot of those other bands kind of going the more. Wasp did it, kind of do the let's try some of this industrial thing out, and I think it didn't work very well for a lot of these bands.
I think with Wasp, to me, I love that album. I didn't think I would, but it's very Wasp. But yeah, obviously they took from Nine Inch Nails. Now, arguably, Nine Inch Nails took from Ministry and Skinny Puppy.
Sure.
Heavily.
Maybe added a bit more pop.
And I'm going to say something else. Downward Spiral's it for me. Pretty Hate Machine, Broken, Downward Spiral. That's it.
Broken's my favorite thing they ever did.
I don't like the Fragile. I don't like anything else.
I don't get into the Fragile.
Downward Spiral to me, I mean, think just an absolutely crazy album. that was that big at the time. I mean, it's just nuts. But
Yeah.
they had one of my favorite bands of all time, Black Crowes, released
That's
Amorica,
right.
which there
Great
were
album.
two. There was a censored cover.
With the pubes.
Yeah, the pubes was you could get the
Right.
censored one, which was just like the actual,
Yeah.
bathing suit. But yeah, I mean that album.
It was a single off that record. It was a big record.
Oh my
Because I mean,
God.
the debut had 90, right? We'll get into
Yeah,
that.
that's a whole
90.
freaking album.
I mean, the whole
debut.
album.
The same with the Southern Harmony and Musical Companion was just like the whole thing was that. I'm trying to
And then
think.
She Talks to Angels had some. I mean, a lot of hits on that.
I can't even. It's gonna bug the hell out of me.
It was a big. I remember it being a big record. I remember the cover more than anything. That's.
Yeah, I'm sitting here talking about how I'm like the biggest fan ever, and oh my God. Well, Wiser Time obviously is a great tune. But a Conspiracy, stuff like that. Yeah, you can see there the censored cover. It's another great album. A lot of really cool stuff for me. It was like the last year.
Mm-hmm.
To me, it's like really the last year of a lot of that 80s hard rock. Obviously, it was Cinderella, Motley Crue, stuff like that.
I agree.
But there's a huge album for me that came out that year, which is I got into several years later. Probably one of the most underrated bands in the history of hard rock and heavy metal, and that's King's X. Put out Dogman, which is so just balls out heavy.
I never really got too
ton of
much into
groove.
King's X. Never really checked them out.
That you know what? Okay, here's the thing. I always tell people I hate the Beatles. I've always hated the Beatles, and I appreciate their influence and their importance in rock and roll, but I was never a big fan. I was always a Stones guy.
Yeah, I was
when it comes
Stones
to the two.
more.
But bands that were heavily influenced by the Beatles, Cheap Trick being one, Kiss, but
Red.
King's X to me heavily influenced by the Beatles. You could hear it in the melodies, in the vocal, just the way the songwriting is. But to me, King's X was able to do it in such they're just a clever band, completely underrated. I've never seen them live. They just actually got back together. They released a new album, I think a year or two ago. Phenomenal album. I can't remember the name of it. I got it down here. It is Three Sides of One. That's a great album. Just a killer band, killer album. I recommend that to anybody that likes like real beefy hard rock.
I think it's it's different with the rock thing. I think that it was a big year for heavy music and rock radio in general.
Mm-hmm.
But I think those 80s hard rock bands, I think they were for a lot of these bands around this time. It's kind of where you can see it kind of ending. But a lot of it's age. I think like a younger crowd was getting more into extreme stuff and heavier bands. I think bands like Megadeth. I think Euthanasia kind of needs a little bit more love too. I really listening back to them. Still, I love that Megadeth record. There's still a lot of solos on it. There's still a lot of characters. You could tell they were incorporating a new thing, something new into their sound. You had to stay kind of relevant. I think a lot of these bands were too the stigma of the 80s by this time. When you had an 80s stigma, it's hard to shed that. Like Cinderella is a great blues rock band. And you could if you're a Black Crowes fan, you should love Cinderella. But I think Cinderella just had that 80s stigma still. It's hard to shake that.
No, they did. They had that I hate saying it's hair metal because it's really just pop metal, to me. But it's like they did have that stigma that of big hair, spandex.
Yeah, goofy
and it's
image.
A shame.
Yeah,
and it's a shame because that album is a great album. But I think the reason why the Black Crowes continue to work, they never had that.
Yeah, they didn't have the
They
stigma
always kind of looked like the Stones or like, Aerosmith, stuff like that.
It was
70s,
marketable, it was
Aerosmith.
more genuine instead of a novelty.
Yeah, they were just a bunch of hippies from Georgia that, and to me, I think that translated a lot better because around this time with Black Crowes getting big, you saw a resurgence with Neil Young, which I think had an album this year. Neil Young and Crazy Horse. I think it was like Sleeps with Angels. I can't remember. I'm not really big on that album, but you had Neil Young. Allman Brothers Band was kind of back with, they started putting albums out from, in the early 90s. Skinnerd, that version, was putting some albums out. And it was like this kind of 70s revival of some bands coming back. So I think it worked with the Black Crowes. And, Stones was still putting out. This may have been the year of Voodoo Lounge. I can't remember.
Yeah.
I could be wrong. But so I think it worked for them. And that's where they were able to and that's probably why Alice Cooper was able to kind of continue on, because
he wasn't really associated with that kind of image in the 80s. And he also was around in the 70s.
It's weird because it's like he did have...
I think Ozzy survived.
He had Constrictor, Raise Your Fist and Yell, Poison, Hey Stupid. But to me, it was like I never thought that he kind of bought into that.
Yeah, Ozzy didn't. Same way. I mean, they kind of transcended that a little bit. I think
other than his kind of female trucker phase on
Ultimate
Sin, which I love that album.
He did look like Bette Midler for a while.
He did.
But I think it's a good transition here because as it's death metal, a lot of underground music is even getting Columbia Records picking up a lot of stuff with Earache. You see it. Napalm Death puts out Fear, Emptiness, Despair, which I love that record. It's one of my favorite Napalm Death records.
That's probably that's number one for me.
But you see it with Earache. You see Twist the Knife Slowly. Plague Rages, where I get my Instagram handle name from. I mean, I love that Napalm Death record, but it is, these bands are kind of big in the underground. And I think that a style of music that really was obsessed still with the 80s, and definitely a reaction to the commercialization and popularization of death metal. I mean, this is a huge year for black metal. It's undeniably probably black metal's biggest year is 94. And I think as Pantera is a #1 band in the Billboard charts, and as death metal's having deals with Columbia Records, down the list, I'll just go through my black metal records. You have De Mysterious by Mayhem, Transylvanian Hunger, In the Nightside Eclipse, His Splendour Os by Burzum, Ceremony of Opposites by Samael, Viking Land and Frost by Enslaved, Principle Even Made Flesh by Cradle Filth, Pentagram by Gorgoroth, Opus Nocturne by Marduk. These are classic records, man. Ancients, Svartalheim, Graveland, Carpathian Wolves, Gehenna, First Spell, the Les Legion Noirs bands from France, Mutilation being probably the biggest one, Hail Satanas.
I'm waiting till you get to Dawn because I want to hear you.
Oh, yeah. Priest of Satan by the Black. My favorite, Impaled Nazarene, which is Suomi, Finland, Percolate. And I'm sorry, Hanky Force. Dawn had Nard, Solon, Gar, Nippler, Buy the Thing, Tease My Nipples. One of the best fucking albums made ever in 94. I'm not saying that thing. It's an amazing year for black metal. This is a huge black metal year.
Yeah.
All these records are classic. And you know what's really funny? I listened to every single one of these records front to back multiple times. That Cradle of Filth record is so good.
And I told you, man, that album is so good, but it's like Danny Filth became such a cartoon character to me. Like even his vocals but Principle that is a killer album. And it's weird having Samael, Ceremony of Opposites in there because it really is a different sounding album.
Totally. Way more Celtic Frost influence and a little bit more of the.
And it's funny because I know I put in the group that album is really the opposite of everything that they released after, which is good.
Yeah,
because Passage is kind of like, it's got moments to me. That's really the first one I heard. And it wasn't until I read stuff where people were like, well, if you like Passage, you need to go back to Ceremony because that's the album. And I remember when I heard it, I thought,
we've kind of touched on black metal a little bit throughout the last few years, but this is for 94. I mean, this is really fresh. Like as death metal, we went to death metal a little bit. You can make the argument that there's some great death metal records in 94, but I think maybe no bands. I love Impurity, but it's like that's still like it's not the strongest death metal releases weren't put out in 94. The strongest black metal records are arguably put out this year. You can make the case for it. It's something newer and fresher, and I think that it's for most people Transylvanian Hunger is their favorite Dark Throne. I could see it's not mine. Mine would be Under a Funeral Moon. But it's still, for a lot of people, it's for a lot of people, this is their favorite version.
Transylvanian is, dude, it's such a groundbreaking album that it's so different.
There's one drum beat
Yeah.
on the whole record for 30 minutes. There's one part where it goes for like 10 seconds. The rest of it's just like learning how to like. It's so, for like the lo-fi sound, for that kind of lo-fi production, it's so primitive. It was massive and I remember seeing the album cover, seeing Phil where the Transylvanian Hunger cut off.
Dude,
It's
definitely, and I do. Tiamat put out Wild Honey, which
It's a great album.
which is I think is a great. It's very different from
super different.
It was kind of like a natural progression from Clouds and the Astral Sleep and stuff like that. But Wild Honey to me is a phenomenal album. But I think that for me was like it for them. I think after that,
I don't really care that much. Yeah.
Deeper Kind of Slumber brings back memories, but it's not a metal album. And Wild Honey to me was just so. It had like this doomy feel to it, but it was like kind of gothic, but not like corny gothic.
It's like moody.
It is, and it's. There were so many great albums, at that time. In Flames, Lunar Strain.
Yeah. I thought that that for that melodic stuff too. I like Lunar Strain a lot. I like that era of In Flames a lot.
Mm-hmm.
I think Edge of Sanity, Purgatory Afterglow being melodic, that's my favorite melodic death metal record from this year. I think it's really catchy. Uncanny, I think, kind of falls into that category too.
Yeah.
But I think as far as like groundbreaking stuff with that, Thurgothan, 1994 for that Doom Death. For a lot of people, for Funeral Doom, that's like their favorite record. A lot of people.
So just like with Disembowelment, I'm gonna.
Never got into it.
I never heard it.
It's really fucking cool.
Sorry, I just never. And it's weird because everybody that knows me, again, like I said with Disembowelment, like you're into like Doom, and sludge and stuff, and you never. I'm like, I don't know.
I think you'd like Thurgothan more than you'd like Disembowelment, because it's a little bit more moody and a little bit more put together.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't have that spastic kind of grindy parts that Disembowelment has. It kind of get a little messy and all over the place.
Mm-hmm. Well,
I think you might like it.
There's two albums, 94, that came out that are kind of like in that Doom. One is kind of related to what you were talking about with Columbia,
and
that was The Obsessed, The Church Within.
Love it.
And that it's a lot of people's like least favorite. They think
it's pretty rock.
They think it's kind of disjointed and stuff, but they have some. Street Side is one of the greatest. I mean, the album is
my favorite Obsessed.
Yeah, and I don't mind it at all. I love that album, and it's the album I first got into. That was the first one I heard.
It's like biker rock.
Yeah, exactly, and that was on Columbia. The other one is Solitude Aeternus.
Yes.
Through the Darkest Hour, which.
Classic.
I love Solitude Aeternus, okay? If you're going to go for Solitude, to me it would be the first three. The next one is Adagio, and I totally dig that album. Great cover of Heaven and Hell on it.
Mm-hmm.
I think Alone is the next album after that. The first three, I'm sorry, no, Downfall's after Through the Darkest Hour, which is a weird album for people. I think for a lot of people, that's like their least favorite. I still like Downfall a lot. Then it's Adagio and Alone. But
I thought you were gonna bring up Sky Valley. I know you got it.
I'm talking Doom now.
All right,
Gloria.
Hold on. Whoa.
No. It's that Solitude album is so heavy, and it's like I rank it among the first two Solitude albums, which I think are the best. And I always tell the story of Brave Words, Bloody Knuckles Fest in 2003. John Perez, guitarist from Solitude, I went up and there was a guy there selling merch, and he had those first two albums sitting there for $25 a piece.
Mm-hmm.
And
Steal now.
Yeah, they were original. I was like, fine, whatever. They were out of print at that time. I know they've since been like re-released, well, like in the past several years or whatever. But I bought it. I bought both of those, and then he said John Perez is walking around. And it was like one of the nicest guys. He signed both of them. But that was also the year for not just Doom, but for Stoner.
Mm.
And so that's where you get Welcome to Sky Valley.
Big record.
You get, the Fu Manchu album, No One Rides for Free, which is a little. To me, it's like the one album people don't really talk about too much when it comes to Fu Manchu, but Caius, and I think it's because it's overshadowed. That Caius album is absolutely massive if you're into Stoner, desert rock.
It's like such an ascent. It's like one of the. I mean, it's the brain and blood of that kind of. Style of music. Yeah.
Sky Valley is in Blues for the Red Sun. Those two albums are just phenomenal. But
makes you just want to drive.
Yeah.
And like it's just
and
perfect.
Smoke.
Yeah. Right. I think it's weird time too. I mean, like Buzz Oven comes out with Soar. Speaking of like Roadrunner, I mean, if you're a sludge, doom kind of guy. I mean, Soar was a big record for. Talk about a band that kind of blew their chance. I mean, they weren't exactly the most well put together ensemble of people, but and Acid Bath when the Kite String Pops. I mean, a massive, massive record. Now in retrospect, back then it was. I mean, but I remember more Manson kids and kids that weren't into extreme metal loved Acid Bath.
That Manson was this year, wasn't it? Portrait of
American Family. Yeah.
But with that Acid Bath. It sounds really corny, but it's also the reason why I love music so much. Because just recently, I'm with my buddy Jason, and God, what show were we coming back from? Maybe I think it was the Wasp show recently, and he's always seen the album covers.
Yeah.
Pagan Terrorism Tactic, and then when the Kite String Pops. Never listened to them. He always thought they were a death metal band. I was like, wait.
Yeah, it's not.
You never heard Acid Bath? And he was like, no. I put when the Kite String Pop. I put that on. The look on his face.
Oh, sure. It's a cool record.
Like he literally was like discovering fire for the first time. He was just like, went out the next day, but he was like, where can I get these? I'm like, you can literally get them anywhere now.
Yeah, you can get them at Sunoco. Like it's.
I'm like, just go pick them up. He was like, I was like, yeah, these aren't hard to get at all. And he went the next day and bought both of them. And he was just like, dude, this is incredible.
Yeah.
Absolutely incredible. And that album is.
They should have
huge.
been a lot bigger.
Mm-hmm.
And you can really hear it. Like, if they would have been able to hold it together, well, I know the one guy died. I think their guitar player or bass player, because Sammy was playing guitar in Acid Bath. I think their bass player died. Mm-hmm. And that's why the band disbanded. But I think, given the audience they had and the people that liked them and how palatable it was but still heavy, they could have been. I think they were on the cusp of being pretty big.
Well, the songs were there too. That's the big thing, is that the songs were catchy,
cleaner vocals where they counted.
Good. I mean, Dax is.
Yeah.
Dax Riggs is just.
I like that they've never reunited. They've never capitalized on it. I think there's.
Yeah, I like Agents of Oblivion.
Yeah, Agents of Oblivion is cool.
Which is cool. I'm not a big Dead Boy and the Elephant.
I don't like them either that much.
And I don't really like his solo stuff as much. I know a lot of people love it.
I don't like Goat Horror really at all either.
You don't?
No, not particularly. I don't really like anything that they've done besides Acid Bath. I think it was really cool, but I think that's got to be mentioned for
Goat Horror hoodie that the guy I used to work with, he gave it to me. It's like the Jägermeister. Just says go. I used to wear that everywhere. Goat Horror.
Yeah. I've seen them live like 550 times.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they used to always play all the time. But respect them for still going at it. But I think Acid Bath for those bands, was the best that a lot of those guys ever did. I see you got 16 Stone on there. Love me some Bush. It's a classic. That's a catchy album.
I love me some Bush too, but not the album. It's something. I ain't talking about the beer either. I'm just like. But I think that there was also a big thing kind of happening with the radio is that, to me, this is when a lot of shit started. So with Bush, the first Korn came out.
Oh God.
It was the last good Pearl Jam, which is Vitalogy. I don't even really like that album that much. Crazy to think about a band that like literally exponentially got worse with each album. To me, 10 is like God level.
Yeah.
And then Versus was kind of like, okay, it's good. You know, I think it's a really solid Seattle album. You know, Vitalogy was just like, again, exponentially lower, where it was like, okay, not that great. And then that band for me literally just went straight like headfirst into the fucking toilet. And I don't understand how that band, it's almost like any time I heard somebody describe it, that with 10, it was like the band and less Eddie Vedder.
Yeah.
And then the more that they gave Eddie Vedder kind of like
Control over it.
Control or more songwriting power, it was almost like the albums got worse and worse. And, you know, because Stone Gossard and Mike McCready are phenomenal guitar players. I mean, not only that, I think that, you know, their original drummer, Dave, I always screw the last name with the Italian last name, Abruzzese or whatever. His drumming to me was so just like reminiscent of Seattle in that time. He was rock. He was busy, and then, you know, they kind of, I think they had Jack Irons for a piece, and then they ended up with Matt Cameron from Soundgarden, who was great in Soundgarden.
Yeah.
And then now he's in Pearl Jam, and I don't know, just really shitty. And STP had Purple, which was a massive album, but it was almost like
it was a big record.
It kind of peaked, and then after that, like Bush, and then that's when you started having the shitty kind of the what a lot of people call the Jarl bands, where people would Jarl the way like
you could tell that it was almost like the 80s rock thing, where like the record labels are kind of running around swooping bands up left and right, and that's why I think, you know, again, you know, I love my segues. I think one of the most anti-corporate styles of music, which is really grindcore, comes out. I mean, a lot of great grindcore releases this year. Needed Control by Brutal Truth, Worship It to Death. My favorite Brutal Truth record, not Extreme Conditions. Love Richard Hoke. I think this is the best anti-corporate for sure. Exit 13, Ethos Music, so amazing. Regurgitate, Effortless Regurgitation of Bright Red Blood, which is probably, people talk about Carcass, Recaputrefaction. I think that's probably the that's probably my favorite gore grind record of all time.
Really?
Genre defining completely. Rot, Cruel Face of Life, The First Suppression, Return to Desolation by Phobia, arguably 93, but really came out in 94. The Grindwork comp that had Nauseam, Retaliation, Vivisection, Plotted Symmetrical Sex Organ, huge comp.
So I see you got Pussy Soul on there.
Soylent Green's first EP, like that's.
Is that your favorite? What's your favorite Soylent?
Soul Mouth Secrets. But I mean, and then you had, you know, Vicious World by SOB. I think totally not mainstream rock, but I think that this anti-mainstream attitude, because you could kind of see by 94, like, yeah, like STP's cool, Soundgarden's cool, but you do by 97 get like, you know, Toad the Wet Sprocket.
No, you get Creed
and like
Nickelback and all this, and it really just kind of
Collective Soul.
Oh, dude, I saw them open for Van Halen. It was so boring. They came out, they played like 2 songs, and they went, "Hi everyone, we're Collective Soul."
Okay.
And I was like, Jesus Christ, dude. I always hated that band. And it just seemed like a lot of shit, especially on the radio, just kind of like less serious.
Yeah.
And I think that one of the best things of that year, that was Woodstock was 94.
It was, yeah. Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers, by the way, Wildflowers. I saw Wildflowers tour in 94.
You did?
I did. It was my first concert, second concert I ever went to after TLC in Montel Jordan, which was also 94 for me. Boys to Men, TLC, Montel Jordan show's never been topped by anything in my life. It was incredible.
That's how, this is how Joe does it.
Crazy Sexy Cool by TLC came out this year, by the way, too. It's better than any metal record ever. But that's sorry, man.
Let's back up a little bit here on this.
Crazy Sexy Cool is better than Transylvanian Hunger. Sorry, this is the weirdest take I've ever had here. But no, it's I think that no, '94 was a really and this time I was 9 years old, man. I was watching all that and listening to TLC. I wasn't listening to fucking Dawn records when I was 9. I'm not gonna lie, like some people on the internet do. But it's like, yeah, I was 11 years old going to like Dawn. No, you weren't. Like I was, I was 12 or 13 getting into stuff, but not. But 9, I was still listening to T-Boz and TLC at this point.
You weren't like 9 in a pit at a regurgitate show.
That's right. But I think it's I forgot where I was really going with this now. But there's
you went on some TLC tangent, so I'm just kind of.
No, it was a big year for a lot of styles. It was a big year for the record industry.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's just kind of
I just think it turned to shit quickly if you're talking about radio stuff, and I think that's why for me, it was like a saving grace finding all of this independent.
Oh, 100%.
Shit, kind of going underground because. I always hate calling it underground, but it's just non-corporate stuff that.
Yeah, but I think the record and the music was so big that as the mainstream is big, the whatever you want to call it, also expands with it in its own way. A lot of people were going to shows, buying records. Record stores were still huge. Like
that should have been a I know that the industry kept selling. I mean, they were selling huge. Especially with like the shit that was coming out, like Nickelback and Creed and Limp Bizkit and all that crap that started getting really, really popular. But it was almost like those, to me, that wasn't like a very dependable fan base.
No, yeah.
And it was like a lot of people wanted something more, and I think that's why I was glad that I found a lot of stuff. because to me it was like Pantera hits number 1, and then after that it was just kind of
you still had I think you had diehard music fans in this kind of like more independent stuff, and we forgot to mention probably the biggest diehard fan base. Slayer puts out Divine Intervention, which I love that record. We talked about
94. What was Undisputed? Is that 95?
Undisputed is 95, yeah.
95 or 90.
And I think for a lot of people, Divine Intervention's like I had a lot of people message me too and like this is my favorite Slayer.
Is that?
Which I think is insane.
Is Live Intrusion 94 or is that 95?
Live Intrusion I think was after Divine Intervention. I think it was 95 or 96. I can't.
I think it was. I think you're right. I think it was 95, maybe. Yeah, and to me, Divine is. I can't believe I completely overlooked that album.
It's the last great Slayer record.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah,
Diablo's
sure.
a Musica guy, and everything after that I really don't care about. That's God Hates Us All. I thought was kind of dumb.
Oh, dude, don't even get me started on his vocals. Like I just can't do it on that album. That God Hates Us All. It's just the yelling.
Yeah.
Like over the top bullshit. I remember hearing that. And that came out around 9/11, I think, didn't it?
It came out on 9/11.
Okay, yeah.
Anthony left school to buy it.
I remember that came out.
And came back and was like, what's everybody freaking out about?
And there was a Dream Theater live album came out at that time, and then the version they put out, before they knew it was happening, had the Twin Towers on it that was kind of like on fire.
Oh, God.
And then they had to, I remember they had to pull them from all the stores, and then they were like, make sure people aren't selling these on eBay, because a lot of people were like trying to make money off of it,
Yeah.
But, yeah, Divine Intervention, to me, is like the last classic Slayer album.
They're a band that survived the 80s, I think, too, in a little bit a different way. Because I think that death metal and black metal fans, the underground kind of held Slayer to such a high standard.
Even though Diabolus is, I think, trash, it's not...
It's better than Limp Bizkit.
And it's still heavy, and it's like anger. It's just mean as hell, but
yeah.
I don't think it's a good album.
It's better than God Hates Us All, I think.
Dude, God Hates Us All. I fucking hate that album.
I don't really listen to either, but I mean, I think we'll talk about Slayer more in 90. Because, I mean, you have Seasons in the Abyss. And I'm sure we'll do the 80s too, and they'll be way more of a prominent role. But it's like, I mean, Bathory had Requiem in '94, which I think is like a lot of people don't like or either kind
Do you
of
like
hang
it?
on. You know what? I listened to it a lot gearing up for this. I don't mind it. It's cool. It's definitely different.
Is it the one with the drum machine? Does he have a drum?
Yeah, and it's a little thrashier.
Yeah.
But it's not bad. But I think that it's
Dude, Quorthon was kind of a weirdo at that time because he was doing like, you know, you had the black metal stuff, and then it went to like
Viking.
the Viking shit, which I think is
It's cool. I like it.
To me, I like the Viking stuff, but he should have found a different vocalist because it's like
He's like the Lee Dorian of
dude, it's horrible. But yeah, this whole when he put out like Requiem,
yeah, it's a weird album.
Destroyer of Worlds, which I think one of them had it was like a song about hockey on one of them. It was just so horrible.
I think there are some
Goofy.
people that think he can do no wrong. I think he can put out a record of him and a kazoo, and they'd be like, "This is amazing! What a genius!"
Probably better than Destroyer of Worlds. But
but yeah, I mean a lot of good stuff, a lot of ground covered.
I wanted to touch on when you were talking about euthanasia.
Yeah,
Megadeth. So I remember an interview at the time where Dave was like, "This is going to be our radio album, and the next album is going to be back to like being heavier."
Well, yeah,
And then I bought Euthanasia, and I thought, to me, it's arguably some of their like the most mature songwriting. I love the album.
You don't really consider Risk to be right up in line with Peace Cells.
Well, Cryptic Writings is the one after.
Oh, that's right, '97. Yeah, that's horrible.
That's a radio album. That was
awful.
shit. I hate that
I
album.
forgot about Cryptic. I thought Risk is '99. You're right. Yeah, '97 was Cryptic Writings awful.
Dude,
Crush 'Em.
that's on Risk.
Is that Risk?
Yes.
What's on Crypt? What's the hit on
Almost
Cryptic Writings?
Honest and Trust.
Trust. That's right. It was a WCW Nitro thing, and Crush 'Em was too. They were like a WCW.
Yeah,
band
Crush
for a
'Em
little bit.
was, yeah, for
It's
sure.
awful. I like Euthanasia a lot. Has my favorite solo on the title track.
Dude,
Love that solo.
that album is.
Thought I
it's
Knew It
just
All.
excellent.
Great.
It's got
Great songs in there.
production. I love that album.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Euthanasia
Cryptic to me was like,
Ugh.
dude, I listened to that recently, and I wouldn't even have it in my collection.
Yeah, it's bad.
But it's signed, and I remember that's when I met. It was Ozfest '98, and the day before, they were at a Best Buy in Canton. Kind of random. So we went down there and we met them, and I mean there were like hundreds of people there, like wrapped all inside of Best Buy, going up and down the aisles, and everybody, it was cool going up and meeting them. And I put my albums down, and he signed them and whatnot. And afterwards, like we kind of waited around, and I remember I had a Euthanasia shirt that he signed. I actually still have.
Oh, nice.
And so he got up. Dave Mustaine got up and went into the side room to do kind of like radio spots.
Yeah.
So when he was done, there were only a couple of us that were standing there, and he walked out. And this one kid that I was with, I can't remember his name, but I remember his brother was in my grade, and so this was like his younger brother. I can't remember their names, but he was a nice dude. He was a huge Megadeth fan. So he comes out, and he was like, Dave, and we were like, yeah, come over here. Can we get just a quick picture? And he literally rolled his eyes, huffed and puffed, and said, you gotta fucking hurry it up. I got shit to do. And I took my CD, and I took the shirt, and fucking just threw it at him. So fuck you. Like, dude, you could hear a pin drop in that place. I was just like, you piece of shit. And he was like, and everybody's looking at him, and he's like, no, I mean,
oh man,
obviously,
that's crazy. You punked out Dave Mustaine,
dude. That was bullshit. Hurry the fuck up! I got shit to do. I was
crack
like,
to smoke.
Piece of shit. I'm like, you were nice to us at the table. A 2-second picture. And he ended up, there is a picture, this kid has a picture, I don't even know.
That's hilarious. The question on everybody's mind, though, for all the viewers, did David Ellefson beat off in front of you?
I don't even. I had that blocked out of my. You just brought it back because I was like, "What is this guy doing? Like, what is this all about?" And people are like, "No, you got to check out the Twitter videos." And I was
Oh
like,
God.
I don't know if I want to. And then I saw it, and
He took a risk.
oh my God.
He thought he knew it all. You know. But I think it's a, you know, it's to me it's the last Megadeth record I love.
Yeah, I think Risk is terrible. Cryptic, Risk. God, what was the World Needs a Hero?
That was the first album. First time I ever got drunk in my life. We were listening to The World Needs a Hero. I was so young. I was drinking whiskey and orange juice because I had no idea what a screwdriver was. I ended up puking while The World Needs a Hero was playing in the background. I was always associated with that.
Here's the thing: I was puking when I was listening to it, but it was because it was a shit album. I remember when the song came on, Motorcycle, yeah, a million miles an hour. I was like, this is so fucking horrible, dude.
They kind of lost it for a while.
Oh my God, just not. Endgame is all right, but I think he really.
Dystopia is pretty good.
Yeah, when he got Kiko in the band, especially with the new album that came out, I think that he's been blowing Metallica away.
Yeah,
in terms
which
of the
really
quality,
hard to do.
But still, it's Euthanasia to me is like the final Megadeth that has that feel to it. And
yeah, I agree.
So I know your favorite Maiden singer put out Balls to Picasso.
I totally forgot about that.
I think that album is trash, with the exception of Tears of the Dragon.
What year was what year are the Blaze Maiden records? We haven't gotten any of those yet. Are those 98?
Okay, so here's the thing. I did with Jason, Pat, and Nick. We did kind of the Ripper era Priest versus Blaze era Maiden, and that's a time that I never want to go back to.
I'll take Ripper Priest over Blaze Maiden. I really had to.
I would rather take HIV than listen to either of that shit. To me, it was like I just said, you know what? Can I just listen to like solo Bruce Dickinson at that point?
Would you rather listen to 16 Stone?
Dude,
you don't like Bush for a 16 Stone? Really? Like, that's like... It's like that?
Fuck, dude. Literally... fucking shittiest. I hate that Gavin Rossdale, that fucking homo... Oh my God, I hate that band so much. God, I hate him. He's such a... That shittiest songs. I just always thought... The songs were so generic.
Right.
It was just such modern rock, like radio crap. And when I lived in Portland, Oregon, I was going to high school. There was this chick that she would always give me a ride home, and she was obsessed with Bush and Everclear. Remember that?
Yeah.
Making such a big deal about him. I'm like, this stuff is garbage.
it's
absolute garbage. But I'm just not.
Yeah, Suomi Finland Periclate by Impaled Nazarene is a lot better. Which, I mean, I almost put in front of, in a lot of the punk records. I mean, I got to just say before, we wrap it up, that's like my favorite back cover to, that a band's ever done, with all of them in like trench coats and like the singer's in a gas mask. And the one guy's just swigging a bottle of Jack Daniels, the guy who ended up falling off of a bridge and dying. Like, it's totally
wasn't that dude in Fintroll as well?
They're like, it's such an amazing. I listen to that record all the time.
I can't remember. Yeah, I'll be honest with you. I don't think I've ever really listened to that album straight through. Impaled Nazarene's a weird band for me because they put out so many classic albums, but it's a band that I really haven't.
Easily my favorite Impaled Nazarene record.
I think
it's a punk record.
The one that I do remember was the Absence of War Does Not Mean Peace.
Yeah.
It's funny because Arnie and I went to Striper and Kicks last night. Great show. Striper was phenomenal. But he told me, he was like, I think I'm going to wear my Impaled Nazarene shirt. And I was just like, dude, that's...
Yeah. If I had to really, honestly, as far as the black metal stuff, if I really had to rank, I mean, I would put that for '94 up there with. I would probably go with that Impale Nazarene, the Dawn record, Dark Throne. I honestly like in the Nightside Eclipse. I love the influence, but I don't really like that more symphonic stuff as much as I like the more primitive black metal.
So here's
even like First Spell by Gehenna. It's like I like it now a lot more, but it's like the keyboards and stuff. I think Emperor suffered from raw production.
here's what I'm gonna say about this is gonna be my hot take about Emperor.
Don't really care.
Don't give a shit about him. Never
Yeah.
liked him. Don't care. I think In the Nightside Eclipse is a wall of noise. I don't understand
The
it.
production doesn't fit them as well as
No.
like raw production fit Burzum and Dark Throne really well.
I think that whatever his name is, I don't know how you say Ishan,
Yeah.
whatever. I think he's a pretentious boob.
Yeah.
I just don't.
I think Opus Nocturne and Mutilation, Hail Satanas benefit from raw production.
Dude, I think that
Emperor
Marduk
didn't.
album. I think the Gorgoroth album is way better. I would that Enslaved album is way better. Frost is like one of the greatest Norwegian black metal albums
I love to think. We gotta thank Cradle of Filth for giving me so many images to beat off to when I was coming of age. So many classic images that
it was either the squiggly line,
the squiggly line porn
cinematic.
after QVC at 10 p.m. or it was a Cradle of Filth shirt. You had like one of two options you could go to. But to this day, why I have such a fetish for British girls when they talk, because it's Cradle of Filth records.
You just like really bad teeth.
Yeah.
It's like, it's crazy looking at all, like just kind of wrapping up some of the hard rock stuff. Gilby Clarke put out Pawn Shop Guitars, which I think Cure Me or Kill Me or whatever the hit song was off of that. Great that Guns N' Roses was done
Yeah, they
at
were.
that point. I mean,
Slash's Snake Pit 94. Was that
no,
later?
I think it's 93.
95. I think? Okay.
No, it's 93, I think.
Okay.
But Pawn Shop Guitar, like everything that the guys from Guns N' Roses did outside of Guns N' Roses, I also think it's like Slash the Snake Pit, Gilby Clarke, Duff, Izzy Stradlin, the Juju Hounds. Phenomenal, all of them great albums. And Pawn Shop Guitars, I actually saw Gilby live a few times. I think he's from Cleveland, and that was a great show. I actually saw him up at the Flying Machine of all places, and there were probably like 5 people there. I felt so horrible.
Forbidden Head Distortion 94, huh? Well,
What do you think of that Downset album?
I actually like Downset a lot.
Mhm.
Downset's cool. I mean, I put that kind of like with Biohazard and Sick of It All, like more of that groove. Obviously, a lot more hip hop and stuff like that, and more what would become new metal. But I think Downset did in a really genuinely cool way. Tommy Haywood got me into Downset when I was younger a lot.
You gotta mention. I'm gonna mention. I don't think that you're into this band as much. Prong, Cleansing.
Cleansing.
Do you
Yeah.
like them?
Prong. I forgot that was 94. Yeah, definitely. I like Prong.
That was my first Prong album. Snap Your Fingers, Snap Your Neck. I mean,
Yeah.
it was just a huge
It's a big song.
album. I love that. It's funny talking about Danzig 4 being the last good one, and now Tommy Victor's.
Yeah, I like Tommy Victor and Prong. I just don't think it. I like
Exactly.
John Cry. I mean, you're always going to compare him to John Cry, which is unfair comparison. He's a different kind of player.
You had, let's go with Queensryche, Promised Land, which I think is the last. I used to hate that album for the longest time. I listened to it recently, and it was crazy. It was just like clicked. It's not alternative at all. It's super progressive. It's like really dark. But to me, it's the last great album from that original lineup. And then that band literally sucked dick for like 20 years. And then when they got Todd LaTorre in the band, coming back with a self-titled a while ago now, I think that he kind of breathed some new life into the band, even though I think they're still missing an element, which is a real lead guitar player, not any, throwing shade to like Michael Wilton or whatever, but it's mind-blowing to know that there was a band like Queensryche that put out Promised Land in '94, and then literally all the way up until, that self-title came out with Todd, every album just got after Promised Land was Here in the Now Frontier, and I thought, there's no way. Each subsequent album, I thought there's no way that they're going to be able to top how bad this one is.
Makes you appreciate Motorhead a lot more, I'm sure.
Oh my god!
I guess I saw them with Motorhead. Motorhead embarrassed them.
You did see them with Motorhead?
Yeah.
What year?
Oh, that would have been 2002, 3, 4, some early 2000s, somewhere like that.
Horrible, dude. Jeff Tate just got like exponentially worse, and then you had Chris DeGarmo left, and then there was the guitar player who's actually back in the band now, and his name's Mike Stone. It sounds like a guy who's just like going to change your oil, and it's just kind of
Cruel Face of Life by Rot is a lot better than anything Queensryche did after that.
And it also, real quick, it kind of continued. Strengthened my love for Zakk Wylde with Pride and Glory. With, the Zakk, Brian Tichy on drums, James Lomenzo on bass, who is back in Megadeth now, I think.
I believe he replaced the guy who takes videos of himself cranking. So,
Jeez, oh God. But yeah, this album to me, I remember buying Zack's Book of Shadows album, and that's got to be, oh my God, I can't even remember. Book of Shadows, '96. Okay, so I lived in Oregon at the time, lived in Portland, so I didn't get Pride and Glory in '94. Obviously was a huge Ozzy fan, and when I remember going to the store and seeing Zakk Wylde, his solo album there, Book of Shadows. I picked it up, and kind of getting into that, it was like, well, reading up on it, like, well, you like Pride and Glory, so I went, and I mean, it was easy to find back then. Bought Pride and Glory. That's the only album they put out.
Yeah,
but it's like heavy metal Allman Brothers.
Really? I've checked that out. I'm not really familiar.
It's back when Zakk could write a riff that
was it the Sons of Anarchy
solo
theme? Or?
Yeah, he was awesome back then, dude. He had like bell bottoms and the long, straight blonde hair, and he just, it wasn't pinch harmonics every millisecond, you know. And it really wasn't until Black Label Society came out, that first album. I think it was Sonic Brew.
Yeah. Which I like the first couple BLS records.
Yeah, and same here, but that's really when it kind of changed. This album,
his image kind of changed too with that.
Pride and Glory, they do the Wizards of Sabbath cover, In My Time of Dying.
Yeah.
But that the album itself is absolute toe on the line. Machine Gun Man, which he did a lot of great acoustic stuff. Some of the stuff you can see on YouTube, it was on MTV. But yeah, I mean, just another killer hard rock album. So a lot of great stuff that came out at the time, but I think it was in terms of the real popular radio stuff from the 80s, this was kind of it, you know, and it's more underground. For me personally, it was more underground from here on out.
Yeah. I mean, we covered a lot. I mean, this is an awesome year. I had a lot of fun doing it.
I have fun doing. I think it's going to be challenging if we when we keep doing this and we get into like the 2000s.
Yeah, 2000s gonna be really hard. I was gonna think about doing 91 next, which is even a challenge. I mean, that's a lot of stuff. So
maybe we should get, I don't know, some of the old guard.
Yeah, I think that'd be a good thing, especially for 91. I'd like.
If we start doing like 90, 91, because eventually I'd like to go into the 80s and stuff.
Yeah.
But especially with like 90, 91, you know, these guys are going to be talking about the death metal scene.
Oh, so yeah. Death metal is going to be heavily in 91, yeah, for sure. But all right.
But yeah, man. No, thanks again. And I do want to kind of give a shout to my buddy Patrick. He went to the Carolina Massacre Fest or whatever. Possessed, whatever. Hooked me up with a killer Possessed tee.
So sure,
I know they're
that's sick.
playing here in Cleveland on Sunday, and then we got
Happy Mother's Day.
yeah. Then he hooked me up with a Demiser album, a couple False Prophet albums. So I can't wait to tear into these. But other than that, I want to thank Patrick again for hooking me up with that stuff. So,
all right.
cheers.
Cheers.
Thanks a lot.